last video, we concluded our analysis of the statement that Atma, the self, is non-dual consciousness, the indivisible, unchanging, independently existent, eternal, infinite, imperceptible essence of everything, ever free of all action and experience. So, we're talking about the self, so that means we're talking about your true nature. And another way of phrasing this is that there's only you. Everything is you. You cannot be broken into parts. You can't be changed in any way. You don't depend on anything at all to be what you are. You were not born, okay? You don't have a beginning, nothing created you, and you don't have an end. You always were, you always are, you always will be. You don't have any kind of spatial limitation, and you are not affected or limited by any of the objects that appear in you, like the body and the mind. You yourself can't be sensed through the senses. You can't be thought of as a thought in the mind. You are that which reveals the mind and the senses. And everything that is, all of the objects, your entire experience, the entire universe, the essence of all of that is actually you. And because you are non-dual, you don't perform any actions. You are not the doer of actions. You're not the receiver of the results of actions, because action requires a duality of a doer, what's being done, and the object that's being acted upon. And you are also free of all experience, because experience itself is an object that's known to you. And the implication of this statement, which can sound a little abstract, is that you're always okay. Right? There's really nothing to fear. There's nothing to really desire. And you don't depend on any particular object, experience, or circumstance to be complete, to be fulfilled. You don't have to fear anything because you can't be changed, you can't be harmed. You don't really have to desire anything because everything's already you. And you don't depend on anything to be what you are, to be limitless, to be full, because none of the objects make you what you are. You don't depend on them in any way. So this is a good thing. Right? You're always all right. But just saying that doesn't necessarily make it clear. It doesn't necessarily convince you of that. It may still seem that you aren't okay. Right? That things may still seem like things do affect you, that you are limited. And that's all right, because that's the point of the rest of the teaching, is to give you the tools to investigate these claims that are being made about what you really are. And through your own inquiry, you can see for a fact that they're true. So the teaching that we're going over now is a Vedanta text called Tattva Bodha. Up until this point, we've only gotten to the title. Right? We've kind of discussed the two-word title and unfolded an explanation of the self. So we're going to get into the actual text right now. If you want to follow along with these verses, you can find a copy of the text on my website under the Self-Inquiry series of articles. It is Self-Inquiry number 4, Tattva Bodha, and that'll give you a full copy of the text. And there's a commentary there too that you can read, But I will say that right now, at the time of this video, I'm working to completely revise that commentary. So soon, in the near future, I'll post the new commentary. It'll be available in the book section of the website, so you can look for it there. So the first part of this text, the very first verse of it, is an invocation or a prayer. The idea of prayer can be a little bit tricky because especially people who were raised in the West, who maybe didn't have a religious upbringing or had a religious upbringing that turned them off to the idea of religion in general or the idea of God. For people like that, prayer, they can have an aversion to prayer, or they may not understand what the purpose of it is. All right. What we're saying is that prayer is just something practical. That's it. When you look around at your environment, you can see that there are a lot of factors at work. Right? If you just want to do anything, in this case, all we want to do is study this text. It requires a healthy body, it requires a healthy mind, and it requires time, at least. So when you investigate those things, what does a healthy mind and a healthy body depend on? Well, it depends on a lot of different things. There are things happening in your body right now that you don't even know about. Do you know whether or not your DNA is replicating properly? Do you know what's happening inside of your arteries? Do you know what your liver's doing? I don't, and I don't think that you do either. So just your very presence here at this moment depends on a lot of different things that you don't really know about, and you don't even really have a lot of control over. That's an internal thing. If you even just look at the environment, what do you have to live right now? You have to have air. Are you providing the air that you're breathing right now? No, not at all. The air is just coming to you. And I assume at some point today, you've probably eaten. Did that food come from you? It didn't. It actually came from the environment. If this morning you got a bowl of cornflakes out of the cupboard, how did it even get there? Now, did it just magically appear in the cupboard? Not at all. If even to have a bag for the cornflakes to be in, and then a box to hold that bag, it requires a lot of different things. That bag itself depends on oil, petroleum, to make plastic. The box depends on tree pulp to be turned into cardboard. And even the bag itself requires a factory that makes bags. And that factory has to be filled with machines that were run and created by people. And those people being there to create or run those machines depends on the same things that you depend on. And even the box, same thing. Factory, machines, people to run the machines. Hey, if I want to have tree pulp, I have to have trees. So trees depend on what? The dirt. They depend on the sunshine. They depend on weather conditions. And that's just for the box and the bag to even be there. Not even the cornflakes themselves. The cornflakes obviously depend on corn, and the corn depends on seed, on soil, on weather conditions, proper rain, proper sun. It depends on farmers to cultivate the corn. It depends on machines that the farmers use to plant and grow the corn, etc., etc., etc. If you kind of look around at everything that's happening, in your life, you can see that it's a pretty complicated and vast web of interconnected events, most of which you don't know about, and most of which you don't have any direct control over. So knowing that kind of forms the basis of prayer. It shows the utility of prayer, because we exist in this complicated field, this universe, and we're just looking for favorable conditions. So where does prayer kind of come into this whole thing? Who are we asking? If we say prayer, we usually think that we're asking God for something. Well, is that the case? What does Vedanta refer to as God? All right, there's a term for God in Vedanta, and it's Ishwara. All right, Ishwara literally means something like God or the Great Lord, something to that effect. But it's not exactly the kind of God that you may be thinking of, especially if you were raised in the West or raised Christian, for instance. What we're saying Ishwara is the actual universe. Not only is Ishwara the universe, but Ishwara is the intelligence that creates the universe, the skill that creates the universe, as well as the laws that maintain the existence of the universe. So it's not some kind of thing that is outside of the creation. It's not something that's in another dimension that is looking out over you and rewarding you when you propitiate it and punishing you when you don't. Right? It's not like that. It's not something that's separate from you as a body and mind at all. Right? You are just, in the same way that it's pretty easy to see that you are a small part of the whole universe. Right? You are a small part of Ishwara. Right? You're totally interconnected with Ishwara. You're a part of Ishwara. So when we pray, we are invoking Ishwara. Right? We're just saying, hey, we're asking for favorable conditions and saying thank you. There's no harm in that. I mean, you can see that everything in your life comes from the environment around you. Right? Your food comes from there, your air comes from there, your body is just made out of food, so your body comes from there. And anything that doesn't come from the environment itself, from plants or animals or, natural occurrences like weather, comes from other people. Right? Everything that's given to you, the circumstances, everything are all presented to you by other people. Right? And none of that stuff is separate from Ishwara. Right? All of that is Ishwara. So on the one hand, we're just saying, hey, life is not bad, life's a good thing. And life gives and gives and gives to you all the time. So in that regard, prayer can just be a matter of saying thanks. Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be alive. I'm glad to have food. I'm glad to have family. I'm glad to have friends. I'm glad to have whatever it is that I have. I'm glad that my heart keeps beating from moment to moment. I'm glad that my brain keeps functioning from moment to moment. So we say thank you for those things. And we also pray for their continuation. We pray for the well-being of everyone and everything around us. And we pray for favorable circumstances to study this text. There's a lot of things that depend on the study of this text. Right? We've got to have time for one thing, and we never know how much of that we're going to have. This could be our last day. We could have another 10 years. We're not really sure. It depends on having something to be taught. Right? So we have Vedanta. It depends on a teacher to teach the Vedanta. All right. So, hey, I don't know how much longer I've got, so we're praying for the health of me as the teacher. We're praying for the health of you as the student. You know, we both need healthy bodies and minds to be able to teach and be taught, and to think over the teaching and assimilate what it means. And we even depend on things like the fact that my computer continues to work so I can make videos, and your computer or your phone continues to work so you can watch these videos. So that's what we're praying for. A lot of things can go wrong in the study of this text. It's going to take time, and there can be a lot of obstacles. So we're really just praying that the obstacles be removed from our path. And it makes sense on a practical level. You know, if you were about to undertake a project and you have a very good close friend that is bigger and stronger, more intelligent, and more capable than you are, then you would ask them for their help. It's the same thing here. It's not that Ishwara is a big person, okay? Because implying that Ishwara is a big person means that it's an ego that has likes and dislikes and has all the attributes of us. You know, we have all of these different, characteristics as people, personality traits. That doesn't apply to Ishwara, okay? Ishwara is just this. Ishwara is the knowledge that creates the universe, the skill that creates the universe, and the universe itself. All right. So from that perspective, from your perspective as a person, it's easy to see that there's little you with limited knowledge, limited skill, limited strength, limited ability, and then there's the very vast universe that is the totality of everything. So you're non-separate from it. All right, and it's giving you everything all the time. So it is really like your best friend. Right? You can look at it that way. You can personify it as a best friend. And at the same time, because it's giving you everything and because it's that much greater than you are as an individual, then it makes sense to invoke that, to ask for the favorable conditions, because that's where they're all coming from. So hopefully that clears up the idea that prayer is some kind of superstitious act. It's just a matter of practicality based on the appreciation of how the world works. There's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about. There's a lot of stuff going on that we don't control. So if we want to have success in our endeavors, we're just praying for favorable circumstances. And also, hopefully this discussion clears up any kind of negative emotions you might have towards prayer, because sometimes the things that people are taught about God, gives them negative emotions because God is portrayed as some kind of dysfunctional parent figure that looks down upon you from some other place and judges you. That's not what we're saying here at all. We're saying that your environment, your experience, the totality of all experience, the universe, is Ishwara. Right? That's God. And if you look at it, the totality of everything is just giving to you every moment. Everything that you have comes from that. It is sustaining you each and every moment. I mean, sometimes you don't always like what you get, that's true. But I mean, all in all, you hang in there for another day because life really is good. I mean, we really enjoy being alive. We want to be alive. It's a good thing. So we're being given all of this. And so there's no real reason to feel negatively towards it. There's not any reason for negative emotions because it's not something that's separate from us. It's not something that's opposed to us. It's something that as a body and a mind, we are part and parcel of. We're completely non-separate. So it's just something that's a good friend, not an angry, judging deity. So thinking about that hopefully can help you clear any bad feelings you have about prayer because of the idea you have about God. I mean, God is just your environment. Okay, it's just your own body and mind. And understanding that, helps you to have peace of mind by being at peace with your environment, right? Because if you have conflict with everything around you, then you're not going to feel very good. So getting those issues out of the way, another question might come up from all you people who've been listening and paying attention to this teaching very carefully. You might say, well, hey, Vishnudeva, you said that Vedanta claims this is a non-dual reality. I mean, you've been talking about that quite a bit. So if that's the case, if this is a non-dual reality, that means that everything is me. So if I'm praying, then I'm just talking to myself. And that is nonsensical. That's totally silly. I don't understand that, and I don't see the point of just talking to myself. Okay, fair enough. That's a reasonable doubt. I can see where that comes from. But if you say that you won't pray because you're just praying to yourself, then consider this situation. What if your spouse, or your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, or your boyfriend, what if you said, well, you know what? This is a non-dual reality. So talking to my spouse or my girlfriend or boyfriend isn't sensical. Doesn't make any sense because I'm just talking to myself. Now, is that going to work? I mean, would you apply that logic to that situation? I mean, it'd be the same thing, right? Everything that you experience, your entire environment is Ishwara, all right? And any given person is part of that. So can we say that we're not going to talk to our spouse because it's silly to talk to yourself? No, not at all, really. I mean, if you're interested in keeping your relationship, then you're going to talk to them. If you wake up in the morning and you feel sick and you don't feel like you can go into work, do you not call your boss? Because in a non-dual reality, your boss is just you, so it's sort of silly to call him and talk to him and tell him what's going on. No, you don't do that either. I mean, if you're interested in keeping your job anyway. The point here is that you're getting things mixed up, right? From the point of view of you being the self, it is true. I mean, everything definitely is you. That's right. But the one that's doing the praying, is that you or not you? I mean, the one that's doing the praying is the body and the mind, which are objects. All right, and we've already established that those can't really be you. All right, so are we talking about things from the perspective of the self, or are we talking about things from the perspective of the body, the mind, and the apparent world? We're talking about things from the perspective of the apparent world. It may not be real, but it definitely has certain rules and functions. You can't dismiss your husband or wife as being unreal and not talk to them or pay attention to them. You continue to play along with the rules of the illusion, so to speak, right? Because you have to. So if we're talking from that point of view, we're talking from the point of view of the person, then prayer definitely applies, because as we've already seen, the individual person is part of this much greater whole. All right? The individual body and mind is part of the totality of all bodies and minds in the entire world, what we call Ishwara. So from that perspective, it definitely makes sense. In the same way as I said before, that if you have a good friend who's more capable than you, then you're going to ask for their help. Well, in this situation, as an individual, you are relying on this entire universe for your everyday existence. So it makes total sense to pray and ask for help. I mean, from the perspective of the self, then everything is you. But why is that really a bad thing? It just means that God is not something that is separate from you, is not something that is different from you, essentially. All right? So, that's the problem that people have a lot of the time, is that they don't like the idea of God because it's something outside of themselves or separate from themselves. But we're saying that that isn't the case. So, if you're going to continue to maintain, your everyday existence, all right, and talk to your friends and call your boss and spend time talking and speaking and paying attention to your husband, your wife, or your dog or your cat, then you can't use the logic that prayer is silly because everything is just you and you're praying to yourself. Okay? You can't use that because you wouldn't say that you're not going to talk to your wife or take care of your kids because you're just taking care of you. You're just talking to yourself. Right? It doesn't really make any sense in that regard. And it should be a good thing. Why? Because more than anything, you love yourself. So why wouldn't you talk to yourself? Why wouldn't you pray to yourself? Why wouldn't you take care of yourself? So for all of these reasons, prayer is a smart thing, and there's really not any reason not to do it. Okay? The people who developed Vedanta were smart people, very intelligent people, and so that's why they actually start this text with a prayer. And I'm going to give you this prayer here in its original form in the Sanskrit. And I'm going to chant this at the beginning of each video here where we're teaching Tattva Bodha. All right? And so, if you want to chant this along with me, you can. You don't have to. I'm going to say it really slow and break it down into each syllable so you can hear it. If you do want to repeat it. But if not, you can just listen to it and understand that what's being said is basically, hey, we're asking that any obstacles in our path that's going to prevent us from studying this text and understanding what it means, we're asking that those things be removed. Okay? So probably get through the prayer here. I don't think we have a lot of time left in this video, so we'll say the prayer here and then we'll try to explain it a little bit. This actually comes from Swami Dayananda's version of Tattva Bodha. I don't know if you can see this right here. This is published by Arsha Vidya. All right, and this is an excellent version of Tattva Bodha. If you want to get your hands on one of them, I definitely recommend it. The drawback of it is that it's very heavy in Sanskrit. So if you don't mind that, it's definitely worth studying. If Sanskrit really isn't your thing, then of course you've got these videos, and then you can look for my revised, the upcoming revised commentary that I'm going to do on Tattva Bodha. You can just study that and it will give you the meaning of the text without using hardly any Sanskrit at all. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about here, the prayer itself. So it's Vasudeva Endra Yogindram Natva Jnanam Pradam Gurum Mumukshutvam Mumukshunam Hitar Taya Tattva Bodha-Prayer. So it goes Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnanam Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitartaya Tattva Bodha-Prayer. And the literal meaning of this statement, given in Swami Dayananda's commentary, is: having saluted Vasudevendra, the foremost of the yogins, the guru who gives knowledge, Tattva Bodha, the knowledge of the truth, is presented for the benefit of those desirous of liberation. Now, it really looks like we're out of time here, so we're going to leave it at that. You want to come back in the next video. We'll explain the meaning of this prayer a little bit more, and I'll give you a little different translation of it, one that kind of conveys its meaning and is a little bit less literal. So one last time before we go, here's hoping that your success, that you have success in studying Tattva Bodh, and that it will help you to understand what your true nature is and give you the happiness that that brings. So that is Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnanam Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitartaya Tattva Bodho-Vidiyate.
Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam.